Um, Hello all, welcome to another session of JavaScript. So let me share my screen. Yes. I think this is the thing is now. So in this session, let's try to have a small recap and let's try to understand what are the things that we are going to learn in our today's current session. So if you can clearly remember, the things that we have learned in the previous session would be this understanding about destructuring the arrays and the objects, understanding about what is meant by date and time object, which is a built-in object in JavaScript, and also we have this JSON and its methods. So in today's session, we'll be focusing more on about understanding class. Uh, Instead of this class, I should add this one thing: introduction to oops. So these are the things that we are going to learn: introduction to oops, class, what is meant by class and its basic syntax, what is meant by inheritance, and what is meant by static properties and methods. So with this, without any further ado, let's go ahead and let's implement it. So I'll create a file named as oop1.js. So there is this programming paradigm. First thing first, let's discuss about this given particular thing now isn't op introduction to oop. So there is this a programming style where we have two programming styles specifically that we use in our respective uh, real world or in our respective programming language. One is pragmatic, other one is object oriented. Sorry, object oriented. Now coming back to this given particular thing knows in these styles, generally what are the things that we have learned till this given particular thing come under this first style. But coming back to the second important thing, this entire thing, this entire object oriented thing is a new style that has been invented into modern languages, particularly the high level languages, the new languages like JavaScript. So what is meant by this object oriented style? To understand this given particular thing, let me give a simple example. So, uh, sorry, till this given point of time, what are the things that we have learned in given particular programming? Or if we want to build an application based upon that, it would be a little tough because in order to take or in order to create a real world example and implement the same in programmings, the same in program, that takes a huge lack. That takes a huge lack, which is nothing but what are things that we have learned till today. If we started implementing a real world object, for example, let's say if I want to create an application for a car company, then whatever knowledge I have so far, if I want to implement, if I implement that thing and if I build the application would be having a very hefty, huge, large section of code. But here we have this new programming style known as object oriented. This means oriented programming. The full form of this given particular oops is object oriented programming. So the full form of this given particular object oriented or oops is actually known as object oriented programming. Now, what is meant by object oriented programming? It is that what in this style, uh, we have only one hero, which is object. So in this style, we write different things in order to create an object, in order to manage the object, in order to store the object. These are the things that we actually do in this respect to style of programming. So what is the advantage of this given particular object oriented programming is it helps to implement real world things easy to program. That's one of the easiest way that I can keep it in words. So whatever object oriented programming that you have seen or that you have learned in any other languages, why all these high level languages have this object oriented programming? It is basically one thing, because it is very easy for to implement real world examples into this respect to object oriented programming styles altogether. That's why we use this object oriented programming. So one very base that I want to tell is this object oriented programming is a programming style where it helps us to build or where it helps us to get real world things into programs. We can implement the real world things into the programs altogether. That's how this object oriented programming is actually used for. Now Specifically in this thing, let's try to go ahead and understand this thing. Give me a minute. Um right. So let's learn about this thing known as in classes, or let's understand about this class. What is meant by class? What is meant by class? Till now, we have seen to create an object. To create an object, we can use object literal, which is nothing but this flower basis, or we can use this constructor function. We can use this constructor function. But we also have this given particular thing known as a class, where in object oriented programming, we have this one thing known as a class, where this helps us to get the things created, like the objects that can be created. So in practice, we often need to create many objects of same kind, like users, goods, or whatever, or menu items altogether. As we have already seen this given particular new and this, where we can create a constructor function. Inside that constructor function, using this new operator, we can create multiple objects, right? But in modern JavaScript, compared to this, using this constructor function to create objects, different huge number of objects, we have this given particular thing, an advanced or an advancement had happened in modern JavaScript, where there is a more advanced class construct. Because till now we have this constructor function, we have this object literal. Because compared to object literal, we can create more number of objects in less time using constructor function. But you know, greater than this, we can have this possibility to create a huge chunk of objects using something, a very advanced thing known as class construct. This class is kind of a construct. This is a construct, a advanced construct that actually present in modern JavaScript language, where this class that introduce great new features which are useful for object oriented programming. Because in creating an object literal, it is very tough for us to create a huge number of objects at a given point of time. But in order to solve that, we have constructor function, where this constructor function, or in this given particular constructor function, we have few limitations. But to create objects in such a way that there is no such kind of a limitation for us, then we do require a important and advanced construct known as class. So this is how we are actually having class as a one of the key thing we need to understand in specific to the respective object oriented programming. Take any high level language like Python, Ruby, any such kind of high level language, Go, or any such kind of high level language, you can clearly see object oriented programming will be present. In that object oriented programming, we have advanced thing known as a class. Using class, we can create n number of objects. We can have complete freedom to create any type of object. It is due to with this one constructor known as class. Now, what is meant by class? If I want to tell you the definition of the class, it would be blueprint on how the object should be. How the object should be, or how the object should be, or should work be. Right? So now let's try to implement this class. So the basic syntax of class is, we use this thing known as in class, and we have this thing known as in like this. Like this. We have a class construct, and we have mentioned the class name. And inside of that, we'll mention one very important thing, which is known as constructor. Constructor. We will write some code. And inside, beyond this constructor, we can have our methods. We'll say method 1 is one such a thing. We'll have some code. Method 2, we have some code, and so on. We can have n number of methods. So if you can clearly observe, when creating an object using object literal or this flower brackets, we have properties and we have methods in the class itself. So this properties in the object itself, sorry, properties in the object itself. But whenever we are using this given particular class construct to create objects, I repeat, whenever we use this class construct to create more number of objects, we don't create methods in the object. We just create this thing. From this class, we can create objects. From this class, we can create an object. So every class will be having a constructor and n number of methods. This is a basic syntax of class. Let me keep it like this. Basic syntax of class. Now, let's say if I want to, let me create a simple class. Let me create a class, let's say class user. Always remember, when you are naming a class, keep making sure that it start with capital letter. The class name should always start with capital letter. That's a standard thing that everyone follows. Now, Another thing is we want to write constructor function. So the constructor function, you already know why we are actually writing it. So we have already seen the constructor function, the same thing. That constructor is same thing. But we have this thing. While writing a constructor function, you have this thing, right? Let's say it would be something like cars. We call this as a constructor function because if you can clearly observe, wait a minute. We have modal. I'm writing an example of constructor function. I'll say this dot modal is equal to modal. This dot modal is equal to modal. Now, if I want to create any kind of an object from this constructor function, I'll simply call it with new. I'll say let Mercedes Merc is equal to I'll say new cars of new cars of Mercedes. Now if I say console dot log merc, we have an object created. We have an object created with the property known as modal with the value of Mercedes. Now let me run the code. I'll say node up1.js. Sorry, node up1.js. I can clearly see we have created an object Merc. It is having a property model and the value is Mercedes. This is what we have understood in the context of constructor function. The same constructor function will be implemented. Wait a minute, let's also manage it. The same constructor function is also implemented inside the class. So whatever constructor syntax that we have written, this syntax. Similarly, we write is this dot name is equal to name. You already know how does this entire constructor function works. The same thing we can implement it here. So now, as if you can clearly observe, in the class syntax, we have constructor, we have this constructor function, and apart from constructor function, we have methods. Let's try to create a method. I'll simply say hi, and I'll say console.log hi. This is how we have created a class. And one very important thing I need to mention is, if you observe this constructor function that we are actually talking about, whatever thing that we are passing here, when we are calling it, and that will be the value, that will be the represented here. So here on the right hand side, I'm talking only about this model. On the right hand side, this model will be actually equal to the value of this Mercedes. It will be more of this given particular thing known as a Mercedes thing altogether. But now let me explain you this one quick fact. Let me explain you this one quick fact. So on the right hand side, this model will be replaced with this value, whatever value that we pass while calling the constructor function. Now on the left hand side, this dot model. So here this represents this Merc. So if I replace Merc dot model is equal to, so whatever line we have written, it will be implemented like this for this object. Let's say if I do this thing like, let's say BMW is new cars of BMW. If I write like this, CARS. Now for this object creation, this line will be looking like, this line will be looking like whatever value that we are passing here will be the right hand side value. This value will be that. So I'll say this on the left hand side, this will be here the object. It would be BMW dot model is equal to whatever value that we have passed here. It will be taken up here and will be replaced in the space of right hand side. So it will be something like BMW. So this is how the constructor function actually works. The same thing here. Whatever value we pass while we have this constructor function, when we are calling this constructor function, this value will be replaced here on the right hand side. and this will be replacing with Merc in this given particular line, and this will be equal to the value of BMW when executing this single line. When executing this single line, this will be the executing. That's the advantage of your constructor model. And one very important thing is, whenever you want to create an object, creating object as below. If you can clearly observe, whenever you're trying to create an object, when you have a constructor function, we are using new operator. We are using new operator. Similarly, whenever I want to create an object from this class, I'll be saying let user1 is equal to, I'll say new, and I'll mention the class name. I'll mention this thing known as a class name. And I'll say if inside this constructor function, if I have any kind of a parameter, I should pass that value. I'll say simply it's of Nitin. Now you can clearly see console.log. Let's say to have user1. Now this, sorry, right. Now this user1, right? Instead, let's say I have this as this dot name. Right. Now we have this respective thing known as user1. And if I want to say something like user1 dot say hi, you'll see this thing, or let's keep it as this as Nitin as hi. You see the hi. So whatever things that we are doing here inside this using this constructor function, creating these objects, we are also doing the same thing using classes. Doing the same thing using classes. But you might be asking, Nitin, we already have this constructor function where it helps us to create objects like in a bulk size. But what is about new in this class, or this new construct known as class? Why it is advanced? Because one very important thing that I need to share to you, which is whenever we are dealing with this thing known as a class, specifically this class and sort of thing, in class, we can have a lot of control on an object. Whenever we are dealing with this class, compared to this constructor function, we can have a lot more freedom to restrict the objects, to create an objects in such a way where it suits our application. So this class construct will gives us complete freedom on how our object should look like. This is much more advanced than this simple constructor function, because this gives additional things that this constructor function cannot gives us. That's why we all are running this one very important thing known as an class or object oriented programming, in which we are writing a blueprint. Like, okay, my object, whenever I create an object from this class, if I create an object like this, so let me write a comment, creating an object, right? Whenever we are creating an object, specifically here in this given particular context, from this class, the object should have the properties mentioned in the constructor. So I'll tell one thing, which is nothing but parameters that are present in constructor function will be properties of the object. So whatever object you create for this given from this given particular class, it will have the basic property as name. We can have multiple properties. We can have name, age. We can have something like is admin, any kind such kind of things. When you have all of these properties, we need to mention inside this construct function like this dot age is equal to age. This dot is admin is equal to is admin. So let me pass these values. My is and say false. So after seeing this class, I can clearly observe there are 3 parameters in the constructor function. So I need to pass 3 arguments. So these 3 arguments are values. On the left hand side, these are properties. Right hand side, these are these values. So parameters that are present inside the constructor function will be the properties of the respective object. And coming back to this thing known as a method. So in a given particular class, if we have such kind of a method like this, any such kind of a method, we can access them here. We can access them here. So if you go ahead and if you say right is right. So in the console log, we have passed three values, Nitin, 23 and false. So in this context, this first will be taking name, will be taking value Nitin, age will be taking value 23, EZWin will be taking the value of false. So this would be say this dot. So if I want to replace this, it would be user1 dot name is equal to Nitin. Similarly, user1 dot age is equal to 23. User1 dot is admin is equal to false. Is equal to false. So if I keep all of them together, it would look like this. By end of this entire constructor function execution, your object will have something like this. Let me write it and then we'll see. Name as Nathan, age as 23, is admin as false. We have this thing as an user1 is equal to. This is how your entire thing. Let me comment it down. By the end of this given particular function, by end of this constructor function execution, your object user1 or your object will look like below. And all of these methods can be accessed by this respective classes, So this is how this entire thing of class will be present. So to be more precise, coming back to this class, this is kind of a, if you want me to tell the exact definition of class, I can say, let me go ahead, let me comment it on and let's say it another comment. Class, I can say, like in JavaScript, I can clearly mention this class as a kind of function, which have more capabilities than normal constructor function, which has more properties known as normal, which has more advanced features than normal constructor function. That's how this given particular entire class is defined as. Class would be defined as. Now coming back to this given particular thing, if you have this given particular class construct, what does this class constructor really lead us? It creates a function with the name user that becomes a result of class declaration. But by the end of the day, this is also an advanced function compared to constructor function. This is also a constructor function. So what it does is, whenever your JavaScript engine will see a keyword known as class, it will create a function based upon this username. Then the function code is taken from this new function. So that function code, if I say function user will be created, and whatever code that we have inside this function, this entire thing, I'm telling you the internal explanation, guys. This will be present here, and this entire thing is present here. This is here. This is here. Now we have this class methods. So they'll store inside this respective. There is this thing known as a prototype. It will be stored inside. Prototype is very bit advanced at this point of time. Do not worry. So this would be the internal, implementation. This is also a kind of a function in JavaScript. The above thing that we have written inside the class is also a kind of function, but this will be the internal implementation. It might look like it's a simple constructor function, but it is beyond constructor function. Trust me, because when you are going ahead, you'll clearly understand it. So, and yes, there is this one thing known as, let me say it, prototype. There is this one thing known as prototype, where if I say console.log user, if I want to print the class itself, we have this thing known as class user. if I want to say double equal to user dot prototype, what is meant by prototype? Let me show it to you. So let me remove this thing. Let me run the code. Let me run the code. Yeah, right. So what is this given particular thing known as a user prototype? So for this respective function, we have some basic behind things. We have some basic behind things. Whenever you try to do this given particular user prototype, and whenever I try to print it, let me say this class, it doesn't have, it is showing that it doesn't have any kind of a backend things. And if I say dot constructor, let's run the code. We have this thing. We have this one very important thing. So we have this one single function, For every function, we have something known as prototype. For every function, we have something known as prototype, in which we'll be having something known as constructor. So if I compare these things, it would be true. It would be true. So if you can say console.log type of user, it's it is telling that it is function. It is telling that it is function. Similarly, if I say something like this, as I have told you, whatever methods that are present here, whatever methods that are present inside the class, they will be added to prototype. So if I say something like this, I'll say one, I think it's yeah, it's like this. Let me do it. I'll say class name dot, if I say prototype dot say hi. Say hi. Let's see what is the thing. No, it is telling say hi is a function. So whenever internally, once JavaScript sees this keyword known as class, it will create a function like this. It will create a function like this. And whatever methods that are present here, whatever methods that are present inside the class, they will be stored into something known as prototype. They will be stored into something known as prototype, like user.prototype. So always remember, every function has a prototype. Prototype. This will be given by your environment. What is meant by prototype? It's very advanced thing. We'll come to that point. But assume that prototype is something that will be given by the environments, like browser and Node.js environments, all those things. So every function will have prototype. Like this function will also have prototype. Then in that prototype, we have this say hi. We have this say hi. We will have this method say hi stored. I repeat, this again is an internal implementation. Let's say if someone asks you, like, how does this entire internal implementation of class will be working? Tell me this. First things first, when our JavaScript sees this given particular word known as class, it creates a function like this. And whatever methods the class have, it will store them. Like the method that we have in this respective class is say hi. Say hi. This method will be stored inside a prototype of this function, of the same function. So two steps. First, function creation. Once function is created, then for that function where it has a prototype, inside that we'll be storing, or the JavaScript will be storing this methods. This methods. This is the internal application. This might not be that useful for you, but it's an internal application altogether. It's an internal implementation altogether. So um I'm missing something. Now coming back to this one thing, let me, I think this is a bit an internal thing. Let me tell you this one thing. We have this thing known as an class expressions. So what is meant by class expression? Just like functions, classes can be defined inside another expression. Like classes can be passed into another. They can return, they can assign, any other thing can happen. But for example, let's see what is meant by class expressions. Class expressions. If I want to say, I'll say let user. We have function expressions. So I can write the above class like this. I'll say hi console.log. Now whatever code that we have written here till this point. that can be copied and be pasted here. So I'll remove these comments here. This is what meant by function expression. We have seen function, sorry, this is what meant by class expression, where we can write the classes in the form of expressions altogether, like this, like this. Similar to like named function expressions, we also have this classed function expressions. So here we can clearly see this is an anonymous class. This entire class is a code where I'm storing inside a variable known as user, where I am storing this inside a user known as a variable known as user. Similarly, you can have it as this. Even you can have a class like this. You can have this. So we have this entire class that is being stored inside a variable known as user. That is being entirely stored inside this given particular variable known as this thing, this thing. So sometimes what we can do is we can also return class. Let's say if I have written a function, I'll say make class. We have this thing known as an press. I'll simply return class. It says say hi console.log hi. Right. So I can say let user is equal to, I'll say make class of hello, hello. And if I want to say, if I want to create object out of this class, because we have this say hi or this make class will return this entire class. Now this entire class will be stored in here. If I want to create any user object, I'll say let user1 is equal to new user of, where there is no constructor function. There is only method in the class. There is no constructor. If you want, I'll copy it. Right. User, where I'll be saying things like Nitin, sorry, Desai, age 24, false. I have to create a different user, user2, for example. And I can say user2 dot say hi method. This is possible. And also console.log user2. Okay, there's this error. Syntax error, make class hello. Phrase. This phrase is not that required. I can remove it. This phrase is not required. This might give you more complications. Okay, user is already present. Okay, user is already with the class. With that, we have same class name. Let's say user1. So right. Now it's because initially we have used the name user. That's why here it is not allowing us. Let's comment all of them. But yes, let's comment all of them and let's see here. We can name this thing as user. We can have this user. We can have this thing user1. We have this thing known as an user1, right? So if you return this given particular classes, whenever this make class function gets readied, this returns us an entire class which will be stored inside here as a class expression. From that class user, we can create an object. That's what we are creating, an object, and we are seeing whether the object is created or not. Yes, the object is created, and we have this method. We have this method that is attached. So this is how this entire thing actually works. So this is what meant by class expressions. We can do a lot of gimmicks with using classes. And also we have this thing known as an getters and or I can say setter or setters to be more precise. If you can clearly observe, um, let me tell you, just like the literal objects, classes may include getters or setters, like computed properties. We can also have computed properties. Let's try to understand what is having computed properties for a respective class. So I'll say class user. Always remember it should start with this thing, right? I have constructor where I'll be taking name, and I'll say this dot name is equal to name. let's say get name. We have a method known as get name. What does this given particular do? It just returns this dot underscore name. What is this underscore? I'll come to that point. What is this underscore? I'll come to this respective point in a few minutes. And also, let's say if we have another function known as set name, where it says or it will take some value. If value dot length is less than 4, I'll say something like console.log name is too short. Name is too short. And I'll simply return. And I have this dot underscore name is actually something known as value. Now, one very important thing we need to understand is we have this thing known as in get and set. What is meant by getter? What is meant by setter? So this method set, this set method helps us to fix the name. This get method helps us to read the name. So this set helps us to write the details. Get helps us to read the details. So similarly, if I say let user is equal to what is this class? User. So it's the other way around. The user, and we have the username to be something like Nathan. Something like Nathan. Now, if I say console.log user, let's see what will be the output. Now we have this given particular property. This entire property is name. Now why this underscore? Because in the constructor we have mentioned just name, but there is no underscore before. But why here underscore? I'll come to that point as we go forward. It is very interesting thing to understand why we have these underscores and double underscores or some different symbols before constructor names altogether. Because it's one of the advancements of these classes. It is one of these advancements of this given particular classes. So if you can clearly observe, what does this set will be actually doing is whatever name that I'm sending here, it checks it. Whatever name that I'm sitting here, it checks it. If this given particular name that I'm sending, and if its length is less than 4 characters, it will show us name is too short. If this condition fails, or to be more precise, if this condition fails, then whatever name we'll be having, whatever property name we have, will be having this value as this. So this is our key. Whatever value this send, this will be passed here, and that will be present here as a data point. Similarly, let me do this one thing. Let user1 is equal to new user of you don't give any kind of a names, just a empty string. If you see in the let's rerun the code. So it is telling that the output is name is too short. So this setter, when we have this thing known as a setter, where this setter is one such a thing where it helps us to have check whether this given particular data that user sent through the constructor is having some kind of a things or not. So this setter is one such a gateway. This is a gateway to write gateway to write the things to the elements. Write the things to the elements. So this gateway is to write the things to the respective elements altogether. So whenever you want to read the element, for example, if I want to say in the code, I'll say user dot name property. You'll see this. So if I want to read the name, this will be working. This method will be working. If I want to set the name, this will be working. So these are known as getters and setters. Now coming back to this, one very important thing is previously our classes, what we had was only methods. Like if you go to this given particular class, we have methods like these two. Like if you go even up, we have a methods like this for a given particular. So this is a thing. Where is this class example? Initial example, yes. Yeah, we have a methods like this. In this class user, we have methods like this. We have method like this. So we have this one thing known as an class fields, where it is kind of a syntax that allows us to add any properties. That allows us to add any properties, which are known as. Let me close it. Sorry. Right. Let me go it. Let's try to understand what is meant by class fields. So this is syntax. This is a syntax that allows to add any properties. For instance, let's try to add some kind of a thing. Let's say I'll say class user and I'll say name is equal to something like Nathan. I haven't added any kind of a constructor here. In this class, we don't have constructors. Let's have some method. Console.log. Hi, this dot name. This dot name. So if I say let user is equal to, sorry, new user of, that's it. That's it. Because here we don't have any kind of a constructor, so I'm not passing any kind of a data while calling this class. Now let's see what will be the output. I'll say console.log user. Right. Now you can clearly see. Now you can clearly see here we have added a property name. We have added a property name to the class user. To the class user. We have just written, we have just written down this given particular property using this assignment operator, which is nothing but equal to. That's it. We haven't created any kind of a constructor function like this. If you go above, we have this thing known as constructor function. This entire constructor, we haven't had this constructor function here in this given particular example. In this given particular example. So this is what meant by class field. So the important difference of class field is that they are set on individual objects. They are set on individual objects. So if I say this thing, name is equal to nothing. If I want to access this property, I'll say user.name because we have created an object known as user and it has this property known as name. If I run the code, you'll see nothing. So whatever value it has it. But there is another thing known as we have already told you, there is prototype. Prototype is must and should. There is prototype for each the class. So if I say something like user.prototype dot. So what is this prototype? To be more precise, if I want to tell you about prototypes, whatever things that are present inside the class will be present inside prototype. Let's say if this class, you cannot understand this class code. And if you want to understand, or if you cannot find, let's say you are working on a large code base. In that large code base, there can be different classes. So from a given class, if you want to know what are the properties that it has, what are the methods that that particular class has, if you want to check it, you can write the class name, you can mention it as prototype, and you can check for this thing. You can check for this thing. Currently, I want to check name. Currently, I want to check name. It is undefined. The output is undefined. Means class fields, to be more precise, class fields, whatever we have created here, the class field, this class fields will not be stored inside prototype. Do not worry about prototype at this point of time. Consider prototype as a basket. Consider prototype as to be basket, but it is beyond basket. So yeah, how this prototype works and all things, that's completely advanced part of the JavaScript. We'll try to finish this entire complete part of JavaScript in some other series altogether. That we will definitely do, and we'll give two advanced JavaScript. So whatever we are learning in this given particular series from beginner to advanced, but that extra advanced JavaScript, which is very confusing, complex, we'll also try to make a series on that. In that, we'll explain all of this given particular prototype and sort of thing. Now coming back to this given particular thing known as an undefined, So here, this class field will not be stored inside a prototype, but one thing, let's say if I have a property, if I have a constructor function where it takes age, I'll say this dot age is equal to age. then I'll only send 23. And I can clearly see, let's rerun the code again. I can clearly see I have printed this entire object. What are the things that are present inside the object? By default, we have this property name attached for the object because it's a class field. That's why we can clearly see here in the output. Second thing is we are passing the age. So using this constructor function, this age is here, visible on us. Now, if I do the same thing instead of this thing, if I do something like this, instead of age, you still see undefined. You still see undefined. So there is a primary difference that when you use name fields, when you use these respective things of constructors, storing inside prototype is altogether a different game because prototype is having some kind of additional rules, which again goes to very complex part if we try to discuss thing. But whenever you have this given particular rule, because in one of the interviews, people have asked me this thing whether this will happen or not. So both are undefined. That's what I have answered them in this respect to interview altogether. Oh, sorry. Let's also close this thing. Let's see, this is the class field. And yes, now this thing is fine. Now this thing is fine. So this is what meant by this thing known as in class fields. So as we have seen this, what is the basics thing of this entire class basic syntax, how to write a basic syntax out of these things. So this is one of the crucial part of our entire object oriented programming thing. Whenever you want to discuss something like in object oriented programming thing, class is one such kind of a thing. So the next topic that we need to discuss is the inheritance topic. Let me check. Yes. So let's do one thing. Let's try to continue this inheritance and remaining topics in next session. So in this session, let's wrap this thing because it's already been more than 50 minutes. So let's try to learn all of these things in a smaller chunks instead of having a extended large classes altogether. So that's it for this session. We'll meet in the next class and we'll discuss about the other integrities that are present inside this object-oriented programming altogether. Thank you all.